Hey, this is Nev Lapwood from Snowboard Addiction. This video is a board setup video, setting up the gear that I have for this year, and specifically we're going to be using the Burton EST StepOn. Okay, so the board I have this year is the Burton Process. It is 155 centimeters in length. Now, just to give you guys some full disclosure, is I actually set this up yesterday and I have rode it for a day already, but I broke it back down to show you how I set stuff up and so that I can actually tell you how I liked the gear. So this board is the Burton Process board, which is a twin tip board. On the back of the board, you generally get these cards that will tell you about the board. It's a regular camber board. And what that means is that if you look at the board right now, it's on a flat surface, and you'll see there's this bend in the shape. What that means is that the board is contacting with the flat area about here and here, and between my hands is a slightly upward curve, which is the camber of the board. Now, a camber snowboard is the most traditional shape of snowboard, and it's probably the most popular choice of bend for most high-level riders. So personally, I prefer camber boards. If you're a new beginner snowboarder, sometimes the hybrid boards are actually easier to snowboard on because they are less catchy. However, for more high performance riding, this definitely gives more feedback. That camber shape, what it does is that when you flex the board, when you bend the board, it wants to pop it back into shape, which is really good when you're carving, riding aggressively and slashing and popping and ollieing and jumping and all the stuff that we like to do on a snowboard. So this board for me, the Process 155, is a board that I will ride predominantly in the terrain park or cruising around the mountain. It's not my powder board. This, I believe, is the board that Mark McMorris rides. I rode it yesterday and I really enjoyed it. Now, typically the last couple of years I've been riding the Burton Custom. The big difference between this board and the Custom is this is softer. And I actually liked how it was softer. That's why I chose it this year. A softer board is a bit more playful. It's more forgiving. So it allows you to bend into your ollies better. It allows you to get into presses and buttering better. Now, if you're a super high-end rider and you're going to be riding aggressive like Tavis off big jumps all the time, you probably want to be on a stiffer board like a Custom. But if you're more of hitting small park features, learning stuff, learning 360s, then a softer board while still being camber is definitely your jam. I prefer this over the Custom, and I'm going to probably ride this board for the next few years unless there's some other nice soft camber boards. When it comes to boots, this boot is called the Photon. Now, last year I rode the Ion boot. The Photon is a softer boot. And again, after riding this for a day, it was much more comfortable. So I preferred riding the Photon StepOn boot over the Ion StepOn. After a full day of riding, you generally can be pretty sore through the feet on a new pair of boots. And this, it was okay, it was tolerable, which is good for a first day. It's not uncommon to be sore. So I preferred, again, having the softer boot. I just found it to be more comfortable. Okay, we've got the StepOn Bindings. I'm going to talk about some aspects of how to set up your gear. First thing is, are you regular or goofy? If you're regular, you're riding with your left foot forward. If you're goofy, you're riding with your right foot forward. Nose of the board, in this case, is here. You can generally tell by the graphic which way the nose of the board is. If you look at the writing of the board is this way, indicating that's the front. Now, because this for me is a board that I'm predominantly riding in the park, I'm setting it up pretty neutral anyway, okay? So with bindings, some of the aspects you got to think about once you've figured out if you're regular or goofy. So this would be regular, that would be goofy. Or I could just turn the board around. You got to figure out how wide do you want your stance, what angles do you want your stance, and how are you going to center your bindings between the heel and toe edge. Okay, so first of all, stance width. Burton boards have it written on them. They have a reference stance width, and this board says reference stance width 21 inches. That means that if you look at the reference locators on the board, which are here and here, that's going to be 21 inches of width. Now, if you don't have any other idea, just use the reference stance. Now I know how wide I like my stance. I like mine at 21.5 inches. So I'm going to add a ½ inch of distance between my feet on this board. Now to give you a bit of reference, I'm 5'9". If you're taller than me, you're probably going to have a stance a little bit wider than me. If you're shorter than me, you may have a stance a little bit thinner than me. 21 inch is around about the average stance for the average height male, adult male, okay? Now, if your board doesn't have it written on here, grab a tape measure and measure it. A lot of boards have it written on these days, okay? So, it also says on here that the reference location of this board is a ½ inch set back. That means that if I was to set up right at the reference stance, I would actually be set a ½ inch towards the tail. Now, I know that on this board, I like to ride quite a lot of switch. So, and I know that I want to be 21.5 inches wide. So I'm going to move my front foot a ½ inch forward, have my back foot at the reference stance, and that there is going to be 21.5 inches wide, which is the stance that I like to ride. Okay, so on the EST bindings, you've got this movable channel here. This little slot fits into this slot. And once you've got that in, and before we do that, we've got to chuck in our channel screw holders. Okay, I've put my bindings on the board and I've lined up the binding screw slots with the sliding kind of screw receiving side. And now you can move your board along to the reference stance for my back foot. For my front foot, I'm going to go reference stance plus 0.5 inches, which is the first line past it. Okay. Next thing I have to figure out is what are my angles. Okay, now angles come down again to what kind of riding you want to do. If you're a freestyle type park rider, then you probably want to be on a duck stance, pretty even between your front foot and back foot. That means if you're going to ride a lot of switch, you may as well make your board feel pretty even when you're riding switch. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do 12 degrees on my front foot and negative 12 degrees on my back foot. Now that's a perfectly even stance because I know that I like to ride a lot of switch. I also like my body to be even. What that means is that if you go and ride a ton, like if you ride a lot, hundreds of days of snowboarding and you're always in one direction, your muscles are going to develop slightly differently. Whereas if you try to get as much switch riding as you possibly can and you try to ride pretty evenly through your body, it's going to develop muscles more evenly through your body, which I think is really good for the longevity of your snowboarding. Now, if you're a recreational rider and you pretty much only ride in one direction, sure, no problem. Have your stance facing that way. It's not the style of riding that I do, but there's a lot of people that ride like that, and there's nothing against that. But if you want to ride park, you want to get good at riding park, consider having a fairly neutral stance. So, on the bindings, the numbers here, 10, 20, 0, tell you the amount of angle. So I am going to go for right in between the 10 and the 15 marker here, which is about 12.5 degrees, ballpark, 12.5 degrees. And on the back foot, I'm doing the same thing. I've got 0, 10, 20. So there I'm at 10, and between 10 and 15 is 12.5, 12.5, ballpark, okay? Now, if you're on traditional bindings that aren't Burton bindings, they go in 3 degree slot increments. So it'll be 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, each one of those little ridges in the binding disc is generally 3 degrees. On the EST ones, one of the cool things about it is you can actually go any angle you want, okay? In fact, let me talk about a couple of things that are cool with EST. One of the things that's really cool is it's super easy to adjust your bindings. So you loosen off the 2 screws and you can adjust the angle, the position, or the width of the stance really easily. Now, beyond ease of use, the thing that I actually find really cool with EST is that the binding between the feet is actually quite soft. Now what this means is that your board, when your board bends, the EST bindings bend with the board. So it gives a nicer overall bend profile to the board when you're riding, which is really nice for things like ollies and slashes and using your board. When you flex that board, the EST bindings bend with the board better than a traditional binding does. That's my favorite thing about EST. So I haven't actually screwed these bindings on yet, so something I forgot about is that on the EST binding, if you look on the bottom here, there's a couple of screws that help you adjust the length of the footbed depending on the size boot that you ride. So this binding here is a medium, and my boot is a 9.5. So on here, it actually tells you what size footbed you should rock for a 9.5. So right now it says 9. I'm going to take those 2 screws out and adjust it. Now I've already done that one because I rode this yesterday. Now, once you have your stance width and the angles that you want, the last part of the binding attachment is how forward or how far back do you want your binding to be. So with EST, you can see I just slid it all the way back, or I just slid it all the way forward. Now that again depends on the size of your boot. And this is really important, it's overlooked. Sometimes I will see people riding with their boots too far back. And what this means is that you have too much weight on your heel edge. Now, if you have too much weight on your heel edge, when you're riding around, you're going to be more likely to slip out on your heel edge. You might land jumps and be constantly slipping out on your heel edge. This is the most common thing I see. The other thing that is possible, I don't see it as much, is the boots too far to the toe edge. If you have your boots too far to the toe edge, your boot could be sticking out too far. And you might be kind of catching your toes while doing toe edge turns, okay? So this comes down to, once I've locked the bindings on, I'll actually clip my boots in and take a look down the profile of the board to see how much is my toe sticking out, how much is my heel edge sticking out. The other thing is I'll stand in the board, and we'll do this afterwards, with my boots on, and I'll feel how much energy does it take for me to rock between my toe edge and my heel edge, because you want the amount of energy between the 2 edges to be equal. In theory, in snowboarding, you should be using your toe edge as much as you're using your heel edge, so it shouldn't be more difficult or more easy to be on one edge than the other. Now I happen to know already that with a 9.5 boot, which is a very typical size, being straight into the middle actually works almost perfectly with a 9.5 boot on this board. Again, it also depends on what board you're on, because you might be on a wide board. If you've got very big feet, you're definitely going to need a wide board. If you have size 11 or above feet, get yourself a wide board. Okay, here we go. This is regular width board, and midway on the board here, 12.5 degrees. I'm going to lock that down. Now, my EST screws. Okay, I've got my bindings on. attach them with the screws. Once you've got them on, it's important to lock them down super tight. This little tool, it's a little Burton EST tool. I carry it around with me while I'm snowboarding because it's super easy to carry in a pocket. It's also super good for getting bindings really tight because you open it up and you can get leverage. I would say one of the biggest complaints about EST is people saying that the screws come loose. And I've rode EST bindings for like 10 years. They don't come loose on me. But I think the key is that once you've got your angles all locked in and down, is to get them on really tight. Lock it down. And having a tool like that allows you to get extra leverage really helps to be able to lock your bindings on tight. Burton's made a bunch of changes to these StepOn EST bindings that I think are way better than the old ones. My biggest complaint with the old StepOns was that I could always kind of feel this little rock. When you changed from heel edge to toe edge, it was almost like a performance delay where you'd be like rock and this little click before you move into that next edge transition. It was very subtle. With the new ones, I'm not feeling that rock anymore. And one of the reasons I think we're not feeling it is they've improved the forward lean. The capability of the forward lean, they've made it way better. They've added this dial, this plus and minus dial, which makes it really easy to add forward lean. Now what forward lean is forward lean basically determines how far forward your boot is going to be leaning when you're riding. And what that means is that it gives you a better snowboard stance with bent knees, but it also it means that your board reacts quicker to the movements that you make through your feet. I actually like to ride quite a lot of forward lean. And so how you adjust it on these bindings is you literally just twist this dial to the plus side. So I'm gonna go 1 twist, 2 twist, 3 twist, 4 twist. Now I just did 9 twists on this binding to match what I have on the right binding. And what I'm seeing is F2 in a bit. I'm kind of like halfway through the F3. There's very little numbers back there, F1, F2, F3. Now what that means is because I've cranked up the forward lean, my binding position keeps me in a slightly more crouched position, which is a better way of riding, a more reactive way of riding. So as a result, when the binding is in the board, it's now going to be leaning forward a little bit more, which means every movement I make is just going to react slightly quicker. And I'm not getting that rocky feeling anymore when I'm in the StepOn bindings. So I did find that you actually have to be a little bit more aggressive when you click into the binding. So you had to kind of like be a bit more aggressive to get in. And I think that's because of the extra forward lean I had. But I found that to be a big improvement in this binding over the old StepOn one. After riding this board yesterday, I had 1 day on it. I did feel it being a little bit catchy around the contact points. And when I say that, that basically means 1, 2, 3, 4. Those are your contact points with the snow. And if you were to take your hand and just rub the contact points, it actually has been ever so slightly beveled off compared to the actual edge. So the actual edge is sharper than the contact points. But one thing I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna go and take a file, and from about 2 or 3 inches here to 2 or 3 inches here, so 5 or 6 inches total, I'm gonna like round that edge off even more with a file to make it less catchy. And I'm gonna do that on all 4 contact points. And why I'm gonna do that is that if you're in the park and you're riding a lot of freestyle and you're landing a lot of tricks, doing things like 270 outs, pretzels, landing 360s, landing 540s, having that slightly less aggressive contact point on those 4 things is gonna give you a little bit of forgiveness. You're gonna catch less edges. That's what it is, you're gonna catch less edges. The other thing is, it felt, even on the first day of riding, it felt a little bit sticky. When they come out of the factory, these boards don't have a lot of wax in them. I'm gonna go wax it up. 1 day of riding, I'm gonna go get some fresh wax into there, and then I would generally wax a board every 5 days of riding it, ballpark, 5 days, 7 days of riding it. But when it's brand new, get some wax in there, that's gonna help. So I hope you guys found this useful. This is a setup video for Burton StepOn EST and the gear that I'm riding this year. Overall, really impressed. I really liked how the Burton Process rode. This is softer than the Custom, which I thought was awesome. The Photon boots are softer than the ones I was riding last year, which again, I felt more comfortable. And the StepOn EST bindings that just came out this year, I found them to be a big step up from the previous StepOn bindings. So I'm gonna be riding these a lot more this year. Whenever I'm riding with my kids, I use the StepOns. Yesterday I was filming some tutorials in the park. I was hiking a box. It was so much easier to just be like, boom, step on, step out. It was way quicker, so pretty good for that. And again, if you're doing anything like instructing or riding with your kids or anywhere where you have to step in and out a lot, this definitely makes it more convenient. And they rode great. I'm Nev Lapwood from Snowboard Addiction. Our goal is to improve your riding.